In the vast, sun-scorched landscapes of Tsavo, Kenya, nature usually follows a familiar rhythm. The land stretches endlessly, painted in ochre and gold, where the horizon shimmers with heat and the air vibrates with the calls of distant animals. Here every creature is bound to an ancient code, a delicate balance of survival where each day is a test of wit, strength, and endurance. The hunter and the hunted exist in a perpetual dance, their lives intertwined by the ever-present threat of hunger and the promise of survival. Lions, with their golden coats blending into the tall grass, move with silent purpose, their eyes fixed on the weakest in the herd. Antelope and zebra graze with one eye on the horizon, every muscle ready to spring at the first sign of danger. The lions, undisputed monarchs of this realm, patrol their territories with a quiet, lethal confidence. Each step is measured, each movement calculated. The pride is a living machine, coordinated, disciplined, and always alert. Their roars echo across the plains, a warning and a claim to all who hear it. Baboons, on the other hand, are the clever survivors of the savannah. They live in tight-knit troops, their social bonds as strong as steel. With sharp eyes and sharper minds, they keep a wary distance from the lions, always ready to scramble up the nearest tree or scatter into the undergrowth at the first hint of trouble. Their calls ripple through the troop, a living alarm system that keeps them one step ahead of danger. But in the late 1970s, the rules of this ancient game were rewritten. The land, once generous, began to withhold its gifts. The rains failed, and the rivers shrank to muddy trickles. The grass withered, and the trees stood bare against the relentless sun. In this crucible of hardship, the old boundaries between predator and prey began to blur. It was then that an extraordinary conflict erupted, a war unlike any the savannah had ever seen. 95 baboons, driven by hunger and desperation, found themselves pitted against a formidable pride of 15 lions. The struggle was not a single battle, but a campaign of survival, waged day after day, season after season. This was no simple clash of predator and prey. The baboons, usually content to flee, began to stand their ground. They formed defensive circles, the strongest males on the outside, the young and vulnerable in the center. Their calls became battle cries, echoing across the plains as they faced down their ancient enemies. The baboons adapted quickly, using their intelligence and numbers to their advantage. They learned to use the terrain, climbing high into the acacias when threatened, or pelting the lions with rocks and sticks from above. They moved as one, communicating with a complex language of barks, grunts, and gestures, each member playing a vital role in the troop's survival. The lions, too, were forced to adapt. Their usual tactics, stealth, speed, and brute force, were met with unexpected resistance. They began to hunt in smaller, more agile groups, attempting to isolate the weakest baboons. They circled the troop, probing for any sign of weakness, their golden eyes never leaving their quarry. The environment itself became a battlefield. Waterholes, once places of uneasy truce, turned into arenas of confrontation. Every drop of water, every patch of green was contested. The baboons would arrive in force, chattering and posturing, while the lions watched from the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. Hunger gnawed at both sides. The baboons, once content with fruit and insects, began to raid bird nests and even scavenge from abandoned kills. The lions, weakened by thirst and hunger, grew bolder, sometimes charging the baboon troop in broad daylight, risking injury for a chance at a meal. Tsavo National Park, with its iconic red earth and scattered acacias, became the stage for this epic struggle. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, every creature watching as the two armies clashed again and again, neither side willing to yield. The seasons turned, but the war raged on. When the rains finally came, the grass returned and the waterholes filled, but the scars of battle remained. The baboons, once timid, now moved with a new confidence. The lions, ever watchful, had learned to respect their unlikely rivals. The promise of rain brought hope, but also a new understanding. The baboons, hardened by conflict, became more united than ever. Their social bonds deepened, and their young learned the lessons of survival from the elders. The lions, too, adapted, teaching their cubs new strategies and forging stronger bonds within the pride. The drought had left its mark on the land and its inhabitants. The waterholes, once battlegrounds, now bore the tracks of both baboon and lion, a silent testament to the war that had raged there. The grass, though green again, still hid the bones of those who had fallen. In the end, the war was not won by strength alone, but by adaptability, intelligence, and the unbreakable will to survive. The baboons and lions, once mortal enemies, now shared a wary respect, each forever changed by the trials they had endured. This conflict tells a dramatic story of adaptation and rivalry. It reveals how, when pushed to the brink, even the most unlikely of creatures can rise to the challenge, forging new strategies and alliances in the face of overwhelming odds. The baboons did not simply run and hide. They organized, they planned, and they fought back with a ferocity that stunned even the lions. Their courage and unity became their greatest weapons, turning the tide of battle again and again. The lions, in turn, had to adapt their own hunting methods to counter this unexpected rebellion. They learned to respect the baboons' intelligence and to approach with caution, lest they be outmaneuvered by their smaller but no less determined adversaries. The saga of the 95 baboons and the 15 lions is more than just a tale of conflict. It is a powerful testament to the resilience of life, the ingenuity of the desperate, and the ever-changing rules of survival in a world where only the adaptable endure. In Tsavo, the echoes of this unlikely war still linger, a reminder that in the heart of the savannah, anything is possible. In the late 1970s, the Tsavo region of Kenya was gripped by a drought so severe that it seemed to silence the very heartbeat of the land. The once vibrant savannah, usually alive with the calls of birds and the thunder of hooves, was reduced to a brittle, sun-bleached expanse. Each day the relentless sun scorched the earth, baking the soil into a mosaic of cracks and fissures that stretched as far as the eye could see. The sky, a pitiless dome of blue, offered no respite. For months, not a single cloud drifted across the heavens. The air shimmered with heat, and the horizon wavered in a mirage of false promise. The Galana and Voi rivers, once the pulsing arteries of life, shrank to feeble trickles. Their banks, normally lush and teeming with activity, became barren wastelands. The mud hardened, and the only evidence of water was the desperate tracks of animals searching for a drink. The great herds, zebra, wildebeest, buffalo, and even elephants sensed the change. Driven by instinct and the scent of distant rain, they began their long, arduous migration. The ground trembled beneath their hooves as they moved in search of water and fresh grazing, leaving behind a silence that felt unnatural. For the lions of Tsavo, this exodus spelled disaster. The pride of 15, led by the formidable Moronga, grew gaunt and restless, their ribs pressed against thinning skin and their golden coats dulled by dust. Each hunt became a gamble, the odds stacked higher with every passing day. With the herds gone, the lions' world shrank. Hunger drove them to the edges of their territory, where rocky outcrops and tangled riverine forests sheltered new, unfamiliar prey. Baboons, quick, clever, and fiercely protective, became the focus of their desperate attention. The baboons, for their part, were no strangers to danger. Their sharp eyes missed nothing, and their society was built on vigilance. When lions drew near, sentinels barked warnings, and the troop would melt into the rocks or scramble up trees. Their powerful jaws bared in defiance. Yet as the drought deepened, the lines between hunter and hunted blurred. The lions, once regal and selective, now watched the baboon troops with a hunger that bordered on madness. Every movement was calculated, every shadow a potential ambush. The baboons, sensing the shift, grew more anxious. They kept their young close and their warriors closer, always ready to sound the alarm. The fragile truce that had existed for generations was unraveling, thread by thread. On a blistering afternoon in 1976, the air itself seemed to vibrate with tension. The Galana River, reduced to a mere ribbon of water, was a gathering point for all who remained. The land was quiet, save for the distant cries of birds and the low growl of hunger. It was here that the spark was struck. A lioness, gaunt and driven by the desperate mewling of her cubs, seized her chance. She isolated a young baboon, its cries piercing the stillness as she brought it down. The kill was swift, but the consequences were immediate and profound. The troop erupted in chaos. Shrieks of alarm and grief echoed across the riverbank, sending birds fluttering from the trees. Instead of fleeing, the baboons gathered, their eyes burning with a mix of terror and rage. The dominant males surged forward, their manes bristling, barking orders that galvanized the troop. The air crackled with a new energy, one of defiance, not submission. The baboons, for the first time, turned as one to confront their ancient enemy. In a surge of collective fury, over 50 baboons charged. Their cries rose in a deafening chorus, a living wave of muscle and teeth sweeping across the plain. The lions, caught off guard by this sudden reversal, hesitated for a crucial moment. The baboons did not attack the lioness with her kill, but instead targeted a large male resting nearby. In a blur of shrieking bodies, they descended upon him, biting, clawing, and battering with a ferocity born of desperation and grief. The lion, stunned and outnumbered, roared in agony. He lashed out, scattering some of his attackers, but the damage was done. Blood stained his golden fur, and his pride watched in shock as he limped away, wounded in both body and spirit. The message was unmistakable. The baboons would not yield. The drought had stripped the land bare, but it had also forged a new resolve in the hearts of its survivors. The spark had been struck, and the plains would never be the same. The initial retaliation by the baboons was more than a mere act of defiance. It was a thunderous declaration of war that echoed across the savannah. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the tension, as if the land knew that something monumental was unfolding. The conflict did not fade, instead it transformed, growing into a relentless storm of aggression and strategy. The savannah, once a place of uneasy coexistence, became a crucible where new forms of warfare were forged. The lions, their pride wounded and their hunger sharpened, refused to back down. Their golden eyes burned with a cold calculation, and their bodies moved with a new predatory discipline. In the days that followed, the lions began to study their adversaries. Two of the pride's most formidable males, muscles rippling beneath tawny fur, crept through the shadows before dawn. They moved with the patience of seasoned generals, stalking the cliffs where the baboons slept, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When the attack came, it was swift and merciless. 3 young baboons fell in a blur of claws and fangs, a message written in blood. The lion's raid was not just about hunger. It was a calculated blow meant to shatter the baboons' resolve and sow terror among their ranks. The savannah itself became a chessboard, every watering hole and rocky outcrop a contested stronghold. The land was scarred by the passage of armies, the grass trampled by the feet of warriors on both sides. Each day brought new skirmishes, each night a tense silence broken only by distant cries. The aftermath of these battles was grim. Carcasses of both baboons and lions littered the ground near shrinking water sources. These were not the clean kills of a typical hunt, but the brutal evidence of hand-to-hand, or rather claw-to-fang combat. Bodies were torn, fur matted with blood, the earth itself stained by the cost of war. The baboons, recognizing the peril of isolation, began to change. Across the plains, separate troops, once rivals, started to converge. Driven by the shared threat, they gathered in secret meetings beneath the acacia trees, their calls echoing in the dusk as they negotiated uneasy alliances. Old grudges were set aside. Dominant males, who once fought for supremacy, now stood shoulder to shoulder, their authority pooled for the greater good. Females and juveniles moved together in tight formation, protected by a living wall of muscle and teeth. The baboon's social structure flexed and adapted, forging a coalition that was greater than the sum of its parts. By the dawn of 1979, the transformation was complete. 95 baboons now moved as a single unified force, a mega-troop. They foraged in coordinated waves, sentinels posted at the flanks, scouts dispatched ahead to watch for danger. Their movements were synchronized, their calls a complex language of warning and command. This new army was a living wall, a surge of fur and muscle that could not be easily broken. When the lions approached, the baboons stood their ground, baring their teeth and screaming in a deafening chorus. Their numbers alone were enough to make even the boldest predator hesitate. At the Ildalal Plains waterhole, the megatroop advanced in a rolling wave, their bodies bristling with aggression. The lions, faced with this wall of defiance, baboons barking, screaming and flashing their canines, chose to retreat, abandoning the precious water to their rivals. The balance of power had shifted. The lions too were forced to adapt. No longer could they rely on brute strength and solitary ambush. The pride began to move with military precision, regrouping after each setback, learning from every encounter. They communicated with subtle gestures and low growls, their strategies evolving with each passing day. The 15 lions, 8 males and 7 females, now patrolled their 60-kilometer territory as a single cohesive unit. They moved in formation, their bodies low to the ground, eyes scanning for any sign of weakness in the baboon ranks. Every hunt was a coordinated assault, every patrol a show of force. Under the leadership of the formidable Moronga, the Pride developed new tactics. They used the tall grass as cover, splitting into smaller teams to encircle the baboons, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Females worked in silent coordination, while the males positioned themselves to cut off any escape. The Tsavo Plains had become a living battlefield, a place where intelligence and adaptability mattered as much as strength. Both armies, primate and feline, were now locked in a contest of wits and will, each side evolving, each move answered by a countermove. In this war, survival belonged not to the strongest, but to the most cunning and united. In the heart of the savannah, as dusk painted the grasslands in gold and shadow, the war between baboon and lion became a contest of raw instinct and cunning. Each side, driven by the primal urge to survive, honed their tactics to a razor's edge. The lions, supreme masters of stealth, moved like living shadows through the tall grass. Their bodies pressed low, muscles rippling beneath tawny fur. They advanced with silent precision, every step calculated to avoid the crunch of dry twigs. Their golden eyes locked onto the baboon troop, searching for the slightest sign of weakness. The baboons, aware of the ever-present threat, moved as a single organism. Their unity was their shield. Grooming sessions doubled as strategy meetings, reinforcing bonds and alertness. Every member knew their place. Every movement was coordinated and every sense was tuned to the faintest rustle in the grass. The pride would often split, fragmenting into smaller hunting parties. Lionesses, sleek and agile, would peel away from the main group, circling wide to flank the baboons. The males, led by the formidable Moronga, became the hammer, while the lionesses were the silent blades. Moronga and his lieutenants executed wide, sweeping arcs, their tails flicking subtle signals to coordinate the attack. They would approach from the rear or hidden flanks, using the wind to mask their scent, their paws barely disturbing the earth. When the lions struck, chaos erupted. The baboons' lines broke, their shrill alarm calls slicing through the air. Instinct took over. Some scattered in wild panic, others clung to the group, desperate to stay within the protective mass. The lionesses, swift as arrows, launched their assault head-on. Their claws unsheathed, muscles coiled, they sprinted with explosive power, aiming to shatter the baboon vanguard and drive a wedge into the troop's heart. The baboon mothers, cradling their young, pressed deeper into the center. The troop's formation tightened, the outer ring of defenders bristling with aggression, while the vulnerable huddled in the eye of the storm. The lions learned to be patient, watching from afar as the baboons followed their daily routines. They studied the troops' patterns, waiting for the moment when vigilance would falter. As the baboons foraged, their formation loosened. Hunger dulled their caution, and the troop spread thin across the savannah, each individual focused on the search for roots and insects. In these moments, a single baboon, perhaps a curious juvenile or a weary elder, would drift too far. The lions, ever watchful, would seize the opportunity, launching a lightning-fast attack. The straggler's fate was sealed in a blur of claws and fangs. The baboons adapted, transforming their social order into a disciplined military machine. Sentinels took up positions at the front and rear, their eyes scanning for the glint of a predator's coat. The troop became an army, each member assigned a role. Dominant males led the charge, while others guarded the flanks or watched the rear. Communication was constant. Grunts, barks, and gestures relayed orders and warnings. The largest males formed a living wall at the perimeter, their bodies tense, hackles raised, ready to meet any threat head-on. Their presence alone was a deterrent, a warning to the lions that this would not be an easy meal. Perched on rocks or termite mounds, the lookouts never rested. Their sharp eyes caught the faintest movement, their calls rippling through the troop at the first sign of danger. The alarm system was sophisticated. One bark could mean a distant threat. A series of rapid calls signaled immediate danger. The troop responded instantly, shifting formation or preparing to fight. When the lions drew near, the front-line males stood their ground. Their lips curled back, revealing 5-centimeter-long canines, daggers of bone and enamel. They lunged and feinted, their roars a challenge and a warning. The baboons' greatest weapon, however, was the land itself. They knew every boulder, every crevice. When threatened, they scrambled up rocky outcrops, their fingers gripping stone, their bodies agile and sure-footed where lions struggled. From the high ground, the baboons became untouchable. They watched the savannah below, their silhouettes stark against the sky, always alert for the approach of danger. Rocky ridges and steep cliffs became fortresses. Here the troop could rest, regroup, and plan their next move, safe from the lion's reach. From these heights, the baboons unleashed their own form of warfare. Stones, branches, and even clumps of earth rained down on any lion bold enough to approach, the air filled with the thud of projectiles and the roars of frustrated predators. This barrage was more than a nuisance. It could wound, blind, or even drive a lion to retreat. The lions learned to respect the baboons' strongholds, often slinking away with bruised pride and battered bodies. When battle was inevitable, the baboons fought with ferocity. They swarmed as one, a living tide of fur and fury. Claws raked, teeth sank deep, and shrieks filled the air as they overwhelmed their enemy. A single baboon was no match for a lion, but together, 20, 30 or more, they became a force of nature. They clawed, bit, and battered, driving even the mightiest lion to the ground, fighting not just for survival, but for the future of their kind. In the heart of the Tsavo wilderness, the baboon megatroop had become a living fortress, an ever-shifting citadel of fur, muscle, and raw determination. Born from necessity, this alliance was a marvel of animal ingenuity, forged in the crucible of survival. Their greatest weapon was their overwhelming numbers. 95 baboons, each one alert and bristling with energy, formed a living wall that even the most confident lion would hesitate to challenge. The air around them crackled with tension, every movement a signal, every call a warning. The troop moved as one, a disciplined battalion weaving through the savannah. At the front, the largest and most battle-hardened males formed a vanguard, their eyes scanning the horizon for the faintest sign of danger. Their bodies were tense, ready to explode into action at the first hint of a threat. Along the flanks and rear, more males stood guard, their presence a living shield around the heart of the troop. Within this protective ring, the females and their precious infants moved with a sense of security, knowing that any predator would have to face a gauntlet of snarling defenders before reaching them. This formation was not just for show. It allowed the baboons to forage in the open, their eyes and ears always alert for the telltale rustle of grass or the glint of tawny fur. When danger threatened, the troop would tighten, drawing together into a bristling mass, every member ready to defend the whole. But the true genius of their defense lay in their mastery of the land. The baboons claimed the kopjes, those ancient, weathered outcrops that rose above the plains, as their strongholds. These rocky fortresses became their castles, their vantage points, their last line of defense. From these heights the baboons could see for miles. They watched the lions' every move, tracking their silent stalks through the grass. When the lions drew near, the baboons unleashed a barrage of rocks and sticks, their shrieks echoing across the savannah, a warning and a challenge all at once. Every outcrop became a fortress, every boulder a battlement. The baboons learned to use the terrain to their advantage, positioning themselves where the lion's speed and power meant nothing. Here the hunters became the hunted, forced to wait and watch for a single mistake. Yet this fortress of fury was not without its cracks. Supporting such a vast army placed a terrible strain on the land. Each day the baboons had to spread out farther, searching for roots, fruits and insects to feed their hungry mouths. The wider they ranged, the more exposed they became. The troop's size made stealth impossible. Their calls and barks echoed across the plains, drawing attention from every predator within earshot. The lions listened, patient and calculating, waiting for the moment when the fortress would falter. Inside the alliance, tension simmered. The mega-troop was a patchwork of smaller bands, each with its own leaders and rivalries. Disagreements flared into squabbles, sometimes at the worst possible moment, threatening to shatter the unity that kept them safe. And always there was the danger of the straggler. A young baboon distracted by play, an injured adult limping behind, or a subordinate male pushed to the edge by a quarrel. These were the weak links the lions hunted for. For the solitary baboon, the world was suddenly vast and perilous. The grass whispered with unseen threats, and every shadow could hide a predator. The lions, masters of patience, watched for these moments, ready to strike with silent precision. In this war of wits and will, the baboon fortress stood strong, but never invulnerable. Every day was a test of unity, strategy, and courage. The lions circled, ever watchful, seeking the single crack that would bring the walls tumbling down. And so the fortress of fury endured, its fate hanging on the strength of every member and the relentless eyes of its enemies. And in the heart of the savannah, the 15-strong lion pride, led by the colossal Moronga, reigned as undisputed monarchs. Their golden coats shimmered in the dawn light, each stride a declaration of dominance over the wild expanse they called home. For years their dynasty had hunted, thrived and ruled, their roars echoing across the plains as a warning to all who might challenge them. With 8 powerful males and 7 seasoned lionesses, the pride was a living fortress, muscle, instinct and intelligence woven together. Their bodies bore the marks of countless battles, scars etched into their hides like badges of honor. They moved with the confidence of those who had never known defeat, their unity forged in the fires of survival. Each hunt was a symphony of precision. The males, with their immense strength, could shatter bone with a single blow, while the lionesses orchestrated the chase, herding prey into deadly traps. Their tactics were honed by generations of hardship, every maneuver a lesson passed down from ancestors who had faced famine, drought, and rival predators. They patrolled their territory with regal assurance, the grass parting before them as they surveyed the horizon. The idea that a troop of baboons, no matter how numerous, could threaten their supremacy was unthinkable. The lion's pride was as much a part of their identity as their claws and fangs. At first the baboons' boldness was met with disdain. The lions dismissed the primates as little more than noisy pests, unworthy of true concern. But as the baboons' numbers swelled and their attacks grew bolder, the pride's arrogance gave way to a cold, focused fury. The lions adapted swiftly. No longer did they split into small hunting parties. Instead, they moved as a single, formidable unit. Every muscle was tensed, every sense sharpened. The savannah became a battlefield, and the pride transformed into a living army, each member attuned to the other's movements. The pride's cohesion was their shield. They pressed close together, forming a wall of fur and muscle, eyes scanning for the flicker of movement that signaled a baboon ambush. The air was thick with tension, every shadow a potential threat. When the baboons attacked, the lions responded with overwhelming force. Moronga and the other males surged forward, their roars splitting the air, their bodies crashing into the baboon ranks like living, battering rams. The ground trembled beneath their charge. The males became the pride's vanguard, absorbing the fury of the baboon onslaught. Their manes bristled, teeth bared. They fought with a ferocity born of desperation and pride. Each encounter left them bloodied but unbowed. The battles were brutal and close. The lions' massive paws sent baboons flying, but the primates swarmed in relentless waves, biting and clawing with wild abandon. Moronga's mane was soon streaked with blood, some his own, some not. The lionesses, meanwhile, became the pride's tacticians. Their speed and agility turned the tide in the most desperate moments. They darted through the chaos, launching sudden attacks that scattered the baboons' formations. Their eyes missed nothing, always searching for the weak link, the momentary lapse in the enemy's defense. Sometimes a lioness would faint, drawing the defender's attention, while her sisters circled wide, striking at the exposed heart of the baboon troop. Their coordination was flawless, a dance of death, choreographed by instinct and necessity. The baboons fought back with equal determination, but the lions' relentless pressure began to tell. Still, every victory came at a cost. The pride's resilience was tested as never before. Rangers watched as lions pressed on despite deep wounds, gashes that would have felled lesser creatures. Their eyes burned with a fierce light, refusing to yield even as blood matted their fur. Each injury was a story of survival, a testament to the pride's unbreakable will. Even as pain racked their bodies, the lions limped forward, driven by the knowledge that the fate of the pride rested on their strength. Yet beneath their courage, a shadow loomed. The lions' greatest vulnerability was not the baboons' teeth, but the slow rhythm of their own lives. Cubs huddled close to their mothers, wide-eyed and silent, sensing the tension that gripped the adults. Every loss was a wound to the pride's future. A single fallen lioness or male could tip the balance between survival and extinction. The death of a seasoned hunter was a catastrophe. The pride mourned in silence, their heads bowed, the weight of loss heavy in the air. Even those who survived bore the scars, their bodies slower, their spirits tested. A wounded lion became a burden, unable to hunt, relying on the pride's dwindling strength. Each day was a gamble. Would the injured recover, or would they slip away, leaving the pride weaker still? The baboons' tactics were merciless. They swarmed, overwhelming even the strongest lions with sheer numbers, their shrieks filling the air as they battered the kings of the savannah. A lion might survive the onslaught, but the wounds they carried festered in the heat, infection lurking in every scratch. The pride's strength was sapped, not just by battle, but by the slow, relentless toll of attrition. The kings were under siege, their reign challenged as never before. Each victory was paid for in blood and exhaustion, the cost of survival mounting with every clash. In the gathering dusk, the lions stood together, wounded, weary, but unbroken, facing a future as uncertain as the savannah winds. By late 1981, the drought had reached its devastating peak. The sun hung mercilessly overhead, baking the Tsavo landscape into a vast, brittle wasteland. Every blade of grass had withered, and the air shimmered with heat, carrying the scent of dust and desperation. The Aruba dam, once a lifeline, had shrunk to a shallow, muddy pool. Its receding waterline exposed cracked mud and the footprints of countless animals, all drawn to this last oasis in a dying world. Around this shrinking pool, a tense congregation of life formed. Elephants, zebras, and antelope came and went, but it was the baboon megatroop and the lion pride that remained, locked in a silent, escalating standoff. Both groups were tethered to the dam by the same desperate need. The baboons, nearly 100 strong, clung to the rocky ridges overlooking the water, their sentinels posted at every vantage point. The lions, lean and hungry, prowled the open ground below, their golden eyes fixed on both the water and their rivals. For weeks the air had been thick with tension. Each day brought new skirmishes, quick darting raids by young baboons, probing charges by lionesses, and endless watchful waiting. As dusk fell, the savannah seemed to hold its breath. Shadows stretched long across the cracked earth, and every creature sensed that the fragile balance was about to shatter. The baboons lined the ridges, their bodies tense, eyes glinting in the fading light. Below, the lions gathered, muscles rippling beneath dusty coats, tails twitching in anticipation. The silence was broken only by the distant calls of scavengers and the restless shifting of paws and feet. Here, on this barren stage, the war would reach its bloody climax. The ground itself seemed to tremble with the weight of what was to come. As the last rays of sunlight slipped away, the lions made their move. The great confrontation began not with stealth, but with a thunderous charge. The 15 lions surged forward, their roars echoing off the rocks. They stormed the ridges, claws digging into stone, using the deepening shadows as cover for their assault. This was no ambush. This was a declaration of war. The pride moved as one, a wall of muscle and fury, intent on breaking the baboon lines. The lionesses, swift and relentless, led the charge. They crashed into the baboons' defenses, scattering juveniles and sending a wave of panic through the troop. The baboon males responded instantly. With shrieks that pierced the night, they hurled themselves at the attackers, baring their fangs and slashing with razor-sharp canines. The ridges exploded into chaos, fur, claws and blood mingling in a frenzied melee. In the confusion, a lioness broke through the line and seized a juvenile baboon. Its terrified screams rang out, a chilling signal that the battle had truly begun. The troop erupted in fury. Baboons surged forward in a united front, their bodies moving as one, driven by rage and the instinct to protect their own. While the main force held the lions at bay, a group of powerful males circled wide, searching for weakness in the pride's formation. They found it in a lone male lion, momentarily separated from his kin. With a burst of speed, the baboons swarmed him, their shrieks rising above the din. The baboons attacked with savage precision, clawing at his eyes, biting his legs and back, clinging to his mane and tail. The lion twisted and roared, but the mass of bodies overwhelmed him. His roars of agony echoed across the battlefield, a desperate plea for help as he buckled under the relentless assault. Moronga, the pride's dominant male, and another lion charged to his rescue. Their arrival scattered the baboons, who retreated with shrieks of defiance, leaving the wounded lion gasping on the blood-stained rocks. The battle raged on, hour after hour, beneath the cold gaze of the moon. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood. Roars and screams mingled with the thud of bodies colliding, the scrape of claws on stone, and the desperate panting of exhausted combatants. The moonlight revealed a battlefield in constant motion. Baboons leaping from rock to rock, lions lunging and snapping, both sides locked in a deadly dance. Neither side would yield. The lions, driven by hunger and pride, pressed their attack again and again. The baboons, fighting for their very survival, met every assault with unyielding ferocity. This was no longer a battle for water or a single kill. It had become a primal contest for dominance, a test of will and endurance that would decide the fate of both groups. As dawn crept over the horizon, the battlefield was transformed. The first light revealed the cost of the night's violence. The ground was strewn with the bodies of the fallen, their blood soaking into the thirsty earth. The survivors, battered and limping, stood in silent witness to the carnage. At least 6 baboons and 2 of the pride's most powerful males lay dead, their bodies testament to the ferocity of the struggle. Many more on both sides bore deep wounds, ragged gashes, broken limbs, torn ears, each scar a mark of survival in the harshest of wars. The carcasses were left untouched, a stark reminder that this was not a hunt but a war. The victors and the vanquished alike had paid a terrible price for the right to survive another day at Aruba Dam. The great confrontation at Aruba Dam marked a pivotal moment in the struggle for survival, but its outcome was far from triumphant. Instead of a decisive victory, both the baboons and the lions found themselves battered, their numbers thinned, and their spirits shaken. The battlefield, once alive with the thunder of charging bodies and the cries of the combatants, now lay eerily silent, littered with the wounded and the fallen. The baboon mega-troop, which had once moved as a single, unstoppable force, was now fractured. The loss of several dominant males and key members left deep wounds, not just on their bodies, but in the very fabric of their society. Grooming sessions, once lively and communal, became subdued as survivors tended to each other's injuries in silence, haunted by the memory of those who would never return. The unity that had been forged in the face of a common enemy began to unravel. Hunger gnawed at the survivors, and the constant threat of renewed violence made every day a test of endurance. Over the following weeks, the megatroop splintered, breaking apart into smaller, more manageable bands. Each group drifted away, seeking safety and sustenance in the shadows of the savannah, their grand alliance reduced to a memory. For the lions, the aftermath was even more dire. The loss of 2 adult males was a devastating blow, one that rippled through the pride like a shockwave. The survivors bore deep wounds, some visible, others hidden beneath their tawny coats. The pride's once mighty presence was diminished, their roars now tinged with pain and uncertainty. The pride's ability to hunt large prey was crippled. The remaining males, weakened and demoralized, could no longer defend their territory with the same ferocity. Rival prides began to encroach, sensing vulnerability. The lion rescued during the battle, his body broken, became a burden, another mouth to feed, unable to contribute to the hunt, his eyes reflecting the pain of lost purpose. The pride, now a shadow of its former self, moved with a new wariness. Their confident swagger was gone, replaced by a slow, cautious gait. Every movement was measured, every decision weighed against the risk of further loss. The war had stripped them of their dominance, leaving behind only exhaustion and uncertainty. Across the plains of Tsavo, an uneasy truce settled. The memory of violence lingered in the air, a silent warning that neither side could afford another confrontation. The baboons, now scattered and wary, kept their distance, while the lions, diminished and cautious, watched from the shadows. The great battles ceased, replaced by a tense stalemate. The lions no longer hunted baboons with the same determination, and the baboons, their alliance shattered, returned to their old ways, always alert, always ready to flee at the first sign of danger. The scars of war were everywhere, on the bodies of the survivors, in the empty spaces where friends and family once stood, and in the wary glances exchanged across the open plains. Both sides had been pushed to the brink, and in their struggle had nearly destroyed themselves. But as the seasons turned, the land itself began to heal. The long-awaited rains finally swept across Tsavo, soaking the parched earth and filling the rivers once more. Waterholes brimmed with life, and the first shoots of green pushed through the cracked soil. With the return of the rains came the great herds, zebra and wildebeest in their thousands, flooding the plains and restoring the balance that had been lost. The lions at last could hunt their traditional prey, and the baboons found food in abundance once more. The pressure that had driven both sides to war faded with the abundance of the new season. The conflict born of desperation and scarcity dissolved in the face of plenty. Yet the lessons of the costly stalemate would not be forgotten. The survivors carried the memory of loss and hardship, a silent reminder of the price paid when nature's balance is broken. The war ended, but its scars, etched in the land and in the hearts of those who endured, became part of the legend of Tsavo, a tale whispered on the wind and remembered by every creature that calls the savannah home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the Tsavo savannah bore silent witness to the aftermath of a war that would forever shape its wild heart. The dust, still swirling in the golden light, carried the echoes of a conflict that was more than a battle. It was a crucible of adaptation and survival. In the wake of the great confrontation, the land itself seemed changed. Animal tracks crisscrossed the dust, telling stories of flight, pursuit, and uneasy truces. The baboons, battered but unbroken, moved in tight formations, their eyes scanning the horizon for both danger and opportunity. The lions, too, had changed. Once rulers of the open grasslands, they now moved with greater caution, their prides smaller, their hunts more strategic. The war had forced both predator and prey to rethink their place in the savannah's intricate web. The baboons, once divided by rivalry, had learned the power of unity. Their megatroop, forged in the fires of conflict, became a living testament to the strength found in numbers and cooperation. They developed new calls, new signals, and new ways to move as one, adapting their social structure to meet the threat head-on. Even former rivals found common cause, their survival instincts overriding old grudges. In the face of a greater danger, the baboons displayed a remarkable flexibility, an ability to set aside differences and work together, their intelligence shining through in every coordinated maneuver. The lions, meanwhile, learned to respect the unpredictable tactics of their new adversaries. No longer could they rely on brute strength alone. They adapted, becoming more patient, more cunning, and more attuned to the shifting patterns of the savannah. The great confrontation at Aruba Dam was a turning point. Both sides, exhausted and wounded, found themselves at the limits of aggression. The savannah itself seemed to hold its breath as the animals, locked in a tense standoff, realized that endless conflict would only bring mutual ruin. The dust settled on a battlefield where there were no true victors, only survivors. The cost of unchecked warfare was written in every limp, every scar, every wary glance across the open plain. In time, the baboons and lions learned to coexist, each adapting to the new reality. The baboons became more vigilant, their sentinels ever watchful. The lions, once relentless hunters, learned the value of patience and the wisdom of choosing their battles. The savannah, scarred but resilient, bore the footprints of both hunter and hunted. Each track told a story of adaptation, of animals learning, changing, and surviving in a world where the rules could shift with the wind. The lessons from the dust were clear. Survival was not about domination, but about resilience, intelligence, and the ability to adapt. The baboons and lions, each in their own way, embodied the relentless drive of life to endure against all odds. The savannah itself was a living, breathing testament to change. Herds shifted, waterholes dried and refilled, and every creature, great or small, was forced to adapt or perish. Drought and famine pressed in, rewriting the rules of survival with every passing season. In the quiet hours of dawn, the savannah whispered of uneasy truces and the eternal cycle of life and death. The animals, shaped by conflict and hardship, moved through a world where every day demanded new strategies, new alliances, and new ways to survive. In the end, the line between king and challenger, hunter and hunted, blurred into the dust, reminding us that in the wild heart of Africa, adaptation is the greatest lesson of all. As the seasons turned and the scars of battle faded, the Tsavo savannah began to heal in subtle, remarkable ways. Grass sprouted where the soil had been torn by desperate chases. Waterholes, once muddied by frantic herds, cleared beneath the patient work of returning rains. The air, once thick with tension, now carried the calls of new life, a chorus of resilience echoing across the plains. In the wake of conflict, the animal kingdoms shifted. The baboons, their numbers thinned but their spirits unbroken, nurtured their young with fierce devotion. The old and wounded found new roles as guardians and teachers, passing on hard-earned wisdom. Juveniles, born in the uncertain calm, learned not just to fear the lion's shadow, but to read the subtle language of the wind and the warning cries of distant birds. Lions, too, changed. Prides grew smaller, but bonds within them deepened. Lionesses, once rivals, now shared the burden of the hunt and the care of cubs. Scarred males, veterans of the great standoff, patrolled the edges of their shrinking domains with measured steps, avoiding needless conflict. The lessons of patience and caution, learned at great cost, became the pride's new creed. Elsewhere, the ripples of war reached beyond predator and prey. Herds of antelope and zebra, once scattered in panic, gradually reformed. Their migratory paths shifted in response to new dangers and opportunities, reshaping the very map of the savannah. The sudden drop in predator numbers allowed smaller creatures, warthogs, mongooses, and ground birds, to reclaim old territories. Burrows and nests sprang up in places long considered perilous, and the patchwork of life grew richer and more diverse. Vegetation, trampled and grazed thin during the war, rebounded in the absence of constant pursuit. Acacia saplings pushed skyward, their thorns a silent testament to survival. Along the riverbanks, reeds grew thick, offering shelter to frogs, insects, and the elusive serval cat. The ecosystem, battered but unbowed, found a new balance, its intricate web rewoven with every sunrise. In the moonlit hush, the savannah pulsed with quiet recovery. Every creature bore a story etched in scars or sung in the night air. The aftermath of war was not merely an end, but a beginning, a time of healing, adaptation, and cautious hope. The savannah, ever-changing, reminded all who dwelled within it. After the fiercest storms, life finds a way to grow again, stronger and wiser than before. Years passed, and the legacy of the great conflict continued to shape the destinies of baboons and lions across the Tsavo savannah. The scars of battle had faded from the land, but not from the hearts and instincts of those who survived. The baboon troops, once fractured and wary, slowly rebuilt their numbers. Family bonds forged in adversity became the backbone of their thriving communities. Matriarchs, once hesitant to risk open ground, now led their troops with calculated confidence, relying on scouts posted in acacia trees and a complex network of alarm calls. Their young grew up swift and cunning, learning to navigate both the dangers of open plains and the shelter of dense thickets. The lions, too, faced a new reality. Reduced in number, the prides adapted by consolidating territory and forging tighter alliances. Boundaries that were once fiercely contested now became zones of uneasy truce, patrolled not with brute force but with strategic caution. Younger lions, born after the war, grew under the watchful eyes of seasoned survivors, males who bore the marks of old rivalries and lionesses whose experience made them peerless hunters. Encounters between baboons and lions took on a new character. The days of reckless raids and desperate standoffs faded into memory. Instead, each meeting was a test of perception and nerve. Baboons, emboldened by numbers and vigilance, sometimes challenged solitary lions with coordinated displays, barking, lunging, and hurling stones from the safety of low branches. Lions, no longer eager for unnecessary risk, often withdrew, conserving their strength for more certain prey. Yet, when hunger pressed, a lioness's stealth and patience could still tip the scales, reminding the baboons that the old dangers had not vanished entirely. This evolving dance between hunter and hunted shaped the broader savanna. The baboons' assertive presence helped keep smaller predators, jackals and caracals, at bay, creating safe corridors for the young of many species. Meanwhile, the lion's selective predation allowed herbivore herds to flourish, preventing overgrazing and maintaining the delicate balance of grass and woodland. Over time, the power dynamic between baboons and lions settled into a tense mutual respect. Neither could claim dominance, but both understood the boundaries of survival. The savanna, once the stage for open war, now thrived on a subtle equilibrium. Each species, molded by memory and necessity, played its part, forever vigilant, forever adapting. In this new era, the balance of power was not measured by numbers or brute strength, but by resilience, intelligence, and the willingness to coexist. The echoes of past battles lingered in every cautious glance and every measured step, ensuring that the lessons of conflict would guide the future of the Tsavo for generations to come. Far beyond the immediate clash of baboon and lion, the shockwaves of their war reverberated through the veins of the Tsavo ecosystem. The old rhythms of migration, feeding, and survival were subtly yet irrevocably transformed for every creature that called the savanna home. In the wake of shifting territories, herds of impala and zebra found new grazing grounds. Where baboons had once avoided open plains, their confident patrols now discouraged smaller predators and emboldened herbivores to linger longer in former danger zones. With fewer lions patrolling the grasslands, wildebeest calves and newborn gazelles survived in greater numbers, their playful leaps painting hope across the landscape. But the new order was not without its challenges. Jackals, caracals, and servals, once kept in check by both lions and baboon alarm calls, began probing the fringes of these safer corridors. Some adapted by turning to nocturnal hunts, weaving through moonlit shadows in search of unguarded nests or the weak and unwary. Others, displaced by baboon vigilance, ventured further afield, sparking subtle shifts in the food chain that rippled outward, touching even the smallest rodents and insects. The birds of the savanna, too, responded. Ground hornbills and secretary birds, alert to the changed patterns of predator movement, altered their nesting sites and foraging routes. Flocks of guinea fowl, once scattered by frequent lion prowls, now reassembled in larger, bolder groups, foraging openly in the newly peaceful glades. Even the elephants, those ancient architects of the plains, noticed the difference. With lion prides consolidating and reducing their range, elephant herds found less competition at traditional waterholes. Calves could linger and play, while matriarchs watched the horizon for the new, more cautious predators. Beneath the surface, the balance of insects and plants shifted as well. With more herbivores surviving each season, pressure on the grasses grew. Yet the baboons' expanded foraging scattered seeds far and wide, helping to regenerate thickets and maintain the mosaic of woodland and savanna. In this intricate tapestry, every thread was touched by the aftershocks of the great conflict. The war between baboons and lions had not just altered their destinies. It had rewritten the very rules by which life flourished, struggled, and endured across the Tsavo. These ripples, invisible yet profound, shaped the fate of countless creatures, ensuring that the memory of conflict would live on in every migration, every hunt, and every dawn chorus rising above the wild.